Okay, so pick a place that you want to work. That's starts with that. Okay, employment. If you want to do well, if you want to be a good employee, if you want to make the money, it's got to start with you got to actually care about what's going on there. What do I mean by that? It can be that they have a product or a service or something that you care about. It doesn't have to be that at all. It can be that they're a place that you can learn something. It's a place you can advance. When I work with students who want to go out and start their own business, one of the things I regularly do in advising them after they graduate from college is I send them out to go to work in the industry that they want to work in. Say, well, okay, so you got to sneak in to do that. I know somebody who wants to start a car sales business, and so would I send her into a company to work there just to learn all of their stuff? Well, yes, I would. Would I have them tell the owners that? Yes, absolutely, actually. And I actually went a step farther, and I actually told the person she worked for the longest in the industry, I actually told the person and said, this is a person who wants to be in your industry. And what I did is I researched and found the best car dealership in the area. The one I actually did it by going around and talking to a bunch of car salespeople. And I said, okay, tell me about your place to work for. And they told me some stuff. I didn't really care that so much. I said, in this region, in this area, if you were going to sell cars for a company other than yours, who would you want to sell cars for? Out of 20 I talked to, 16 of them gave me the same name. Okay, now there's the company I want my person to work for. And I went over and said, this person is going to be very, very good. This person is going to sell cars incredibly well. She wants to own a dealership. The reason she should work for you is because she's going to work for one of these dealerships, and you would be better off to ever working for you than against you. Why does she want to work for you? Because I think she can learn stuff here. Because I think you're actually good. As a matter of fact, your competitors think you're actually good. Is that the sort of thing an owner wants to hear? Damn right. As a matter of fact, the owner said, send her over. We'll hire her immediately. As a matter of fact, I think the owner called her and said, or when she walked into the business, I think they greeted her with, are you our new salesperson? Owners are not afraid of that, okay? So you start with, where do I want to work? It's a place that you believe in and can do something for you. I do not say you need to be altruistic. You are not going out there to sell your services just purely for the sake of doing it, and you're not going to work just because you believe in a company or whatever. That's not what I'm asking you to do. What I'm asking you to do is sell you as a product. And not every place is worthy of you. So you pick a place that you want to work for. Okay? Then you go to then you got to figure out how are you going to make the money. This is all this comes down to. Okay? Employees, your job is to make the money. How do you do that? How much? Let's start with how much money do you have to make them? Okay? I have a minimum. Okay? My minimum is what I call double. Okay? So it starts with, the first one is, how people say, how much are you going to be paid? When they talk about $15 an hour minimum wage, they're talking about what you pay an employee. That is not what they cost. Okay? That is what, it's not even their take home, because taxes come out of that. The thing is only the employee taxes come out of that, and there are employer taxes on top of that. I know those of you who own businesses who are watching this are like, yeah, no shit. You wouldn't believe how often, okay, this is one between me and the business owners who are watching this, okay? I'm at the Central Washington University College of Business. I'm standing in front of a room of 120 students, and I say, a $15 an hour employee, what do they cost? Chirp, chirp, chirp. Nothing. $15? Is it more? Oh my gosh! That was, if there was any pet peeve, it was that we didn't have at the College of Business an orientation in which we brought every student going through a College of Business. We needed to bring them in and sit them down and say, here are the top 100 things you can't graduate. You can't even call yourself a business student without knowing. Like employees, you pay taxes on top of them. There are lots of costs on top of that. $15 an hour is not $15 an hour. The problem with $15 an hour is $15 an hour is that plus taxes. And when you look at the total cost of employee, it is really hard to flip enough burgers to be worth 15 bucks an hour. It is economically not feasible. So how do I calculate them? So it begins with what the take home is. So if the take home is, or what we say the salary is, or what we say the pay is, let's take $10 an hour. Okay? Because that's not even legal in Washington State. Because I can't do that. I'm in Washington State, so let's make this 15 because that's what it's going to be. Washington, we're currently at 1170 or something. I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Let's make it 15. So what does a $15 an hour employee cost? Okay, there are two ways of calculating this that I teach anybody that I'm teaching business. There's a simple and a difficult. So it's a... Are you serious? My off-screen assistant just told me currently that's $13.69 is
for 2021.
Is for this year in Washington State. The minimum wage for everything is $13.69. Okay, great. I don't handle paying employees at the moment, so but we're going to talk about this. So, what do they actually cost? So I really, in all honesty, have a 3-stage, okay? So, the simplest one is this. If an employee costs me $15 an hour, they cost $30 an hour. How do I justify that? Okay, let's go to the second one. The second one is the most basics that they cost that amount, $15, plus whatever the taxes are on top of that. And in Washington State, that's going to be labor and industry taxes. It's going to be, so it's a set of taxes that go on top of that. And those are set based upon your industry. So the labor and industry part, that's a liability tax side of it. So it's paying for employees who are injured, and you've got unemployment tax with this, and that's based upon things like how often do they get hurt, how bad do they get hurt, things like that. So an accountant, that add-on piece is smaller than a deep sea diver, which I'm sure is wildly expensive. Okay, and it's based upon industry. They know how much they pay out in insurance claims and how much unemployment there is and those sorts of things. So it's all calculated in there. So you have this piece. And so that is usually someplace between $1 an hour to $7, $8, $9 an hour on $15. It can range hugely based upon how dangerous something is. Okay. Then there would be any other direct costs that you have, like training and uniforms and things, all of those sorts of things. So that adds into that simple. The complex, and it's one that, depending on the business and how tight the parameters, how tight the margins are in a business, the more I want the owner to know exactly what that cost is. And when I start looking at how do I calculate the total cost of an employee, I start looking at things like, okay, what does an employee hour cost? Okay, what I mean by that is if I need to get an hour of work out of an employee, how many hours does an employee have to work? Okay, because you have the parameters of things like the government says you have to give a person so much time off for every so many hours they work. You have to give them lunch. You have to give them breaks. Paid breaks. These sorts of things. You have those are calculated in it. Then you have any internal ones. How do I give paid breaks? Things like that. In Washington State, I now have to give paid maternity leave for all of them, boys and girls. Okay, I have to. So then you have to calculate honestly things like, okay, if my business is hiring a lot of 20 to 25-year-olds, what is the cost of a male 20 to 25-year-old versus a female 20 to 25-year-old? That's the stuff they don't tell you when they talk about how much money they make per hour and how it compares. Does work productivity change between the two? Yes, it does. If you talk sub 30-year-old females, time hour time calculation is different, because if you don't calculate the amount of time that they are likely to not work during that time, but you're unable to replace them or fire them or anything else, if you don't do that calculation, you're an idiot. You have to calculate. Okay, so I said rule number 1 is employees steal. I don't know if this is numbered number 2, but one of my other major rules, and I need to turn this into actual numbered system. One of my other major ones is businesses run on reality, not on political correctness. Okay? It is politically correct to say men and women produce at exactly the same rate. They do when they're working, but they don't work at the same rate. I'm sorry, they don't. You have to look at actualities. Why? Well, I have zero problem with women taking time off, giving birth to a child, those sorts of things. What it is it's a competitive disadvantage because of the fact that it's time. And what I got to look at is the actual calculation of how many hours per year am I actually going to get out of an employee. Okay? I have to calculate things like employees' likelihood to spend time distracted. Okay? One of the ones that one of my other partners that I work with said the first thing we'd like to do with every person that we work with who's starting a business, and most of the people we talk to are starting a business, are 19 to 23 years old. The first thing we want to do, we actually wanted to teach a class at the college how to get rid of your boyfriend or your girlfriend.
Huh? How to break up.
Yeah, how to break up. Why? Because we want them to break up. Why? Because they don't have time for it. A business owner doesn't have time for that. Why? Okay, well, as an employee, it's the same thing. A 22-year-old guy who just had a breakup yesterday is a freaking useless employee. They're useless. Why have companies traditionally wanted to hire people who were married in stable relationships? They've wanted to because if you look at the man hours they work a higher total number of man hours because they're less distracted by things going on in life. That's changing because we've destabilized marriage in our country, and when you destabilize marriage, there's lots more divorces and things like that. And all of those things affect workflow. So when you're looking for employees, you're going, how do I calculate that? I started trying to calculate how many hours are they actually going to work, okay, in different jobs. How much are they going to be hurt? How much are they going to... how much of a break. I have in our manufacturing company, I have jobs in there that things like we track very closely how long can you run this machine before your mistake rate, your error rate starts to go up, because they're physically demanding running a piece of equipment. And giving them the breaks doesn't make them totally 100% recovered, which means that some jobs cannot be done well for 8 hours in a day. So you got to switch them off to something else and have a different employee do it. It's all of these things calculate in. And so at that highest tier of what an employee costs, one of the ones I have mentioned is theft. Okay? Employees steal. We talked about time. Time's one of them. But, my gosh, you won't run a company very long with very many employees before you start to notice things like you go through way more toilet paper than you possibly have enough use for toilet paper going on, things like that. The classic one is look around your house and how many pens do you have laying around your house you didn't pay for. Okay? They all came from someplace. Some of them, where did the classic idea of putting the company's name on a pen come from? It's gaining value back out of stolen pens. It really is that. Just go, okay, at least if the pen walks away, it walks away with an advertisement on it. Okay? Those sorts of things, from small theft to bigger theft. And no, even good people, I'm not even saying, we talk about theft as this, we think of it as this big evil thing, but it's not. A lot of it is simplistic stuff. From taking longer, they're frustrated today, or they don't feel good, so their bathroom breaks get longer and longer and things like that. And large corporations crack down on that stuff like crazy. They time how long you're away from a machine and all those sorts of things. The one that gets all the credit for it right now that you hear all the time in the news is Amazon. Amazon times bathroom breaks and things like that. Why? Well, they got hundreds of thousands of employees. And every employee, if every employee takes 2 extra minutes a day, Gosh, you can lose whole work years in a single day with enough employees, where you paid for an entire year employee's time and got nothing for it because they're going away for a bathroom break and they're not going away and coming back motivated by what I need. They're doing it by what they want, which is they're taking that much longer than they have to. Okay? So what does it is a very complex calculation. So I go with the most simple calculation, which is I assume every one of my employees costs me twice what I say I'm going to pay them. If I say I'm going to pay them $15, they cost $30. And I have found by doing enough of the complex calculations is virtually every employee costs double what you pay them. It really holds up. I could really prove that out. It's complex. It's workspace. It's training. It's all those things. But when you're looking for employment, the most basic thing is look at an employee that costs whatever they say you're going to pay you, you cost double that. $15 an hour employee costs $30 an hour. So the question is how much do I expect an employee to make? Okay? For me, my break-even point. What do I mean by break-even? The point at which an employee is worth having. Where an employee is worth... I'm better off than if I didn't have the employee at all. Calculation that I would talk to you about my students. Baseball's a stat game, and I really like that about it. There's stats for everything in baseball. One of the stats that's really interesting to me is the WAR stat. It's wins over replacement, or wins above replacement, or depending on how it's turned. But the basic idea of it is the statisticians have determined what the average replacement player in Major League Baseball at a position does for a team. So if I were to pluck a second baseman, your starting second baseman off your team, if I were to take the next guy up, which is the average non-starting second baseman in baseball, that's the replacement player. And why do we go off of that average one? Well, because if mine sucks, if my starter gets injured and my backup guy, how long do I need my backup guy for? As long as it takes for me to buy somebody else's backup player. So maybe a couple of days. That's why you go off the average, because my starting second baseman, I'm giving him lots of money. If he gets injured, I got a guy who can fill that spot. But I'm not stuck with that guy because that guy just became way more valuable than my number two guy, which means I can afford to pay somebody else's team, and I'm immediately hunting for the best non-starting player available. Okay? So that is this mythical replacement player. They have a stat value. And the replacement player is not nearly as good as a starter. Okay? He probably doesn't. If we're talking about second base, he doesn't field as good, so he has more errors than any guy starting. If he made less errors, he'd be starting for somebody. So he's a guy who's not good enough to start for anybody. So he's going to have more errors. Every error is base movement, so that's players being moved around the base paths. Every X number of base paths moved, 4 of them or so, turns into a run. So each one's worth a certain number of runs. He doesn't hit quite as good, so he doesn't get on base quite as often. And so he hits X number of times. Okay? And so he does all of these things that add up to a baseball player. Okay? And a starter's value, one of the most valuable stat, is this mythical guy who I can put on second base on any day of the week. I can get one anytime I want. How much better is my starter versus that? Okay? And one of the guys who had great wins against replacement was Ichiro when he played. So he's one that really got me into it. And it's because wins against replacement, one of the things I like about it is it's a complex enough stat that it takes into account lots of things that a batting average doesn't take into account for. Because it captures kind of the whole game, both sides, the offense and defense. But it says, if I were to take the average backup right fielder, Ichiro is worth a fortune over that guy. Because Ichiro is going to be on base twice as often as that guy. Ichiro's going to steal massively more bases than that guy. Ichiro's the fastest guy out there, so he's going to turn singles into doubles more than that guy. He's going to catch far more balls in the outfield. He's going to make less errors. He's going to throw more guys out, and so wins against replacement. So for every time that a guy adds up to a score, there's also an average across all of baseball as to how many runs it takes to win a game. So if a guy adds up to enough wins, enough runs, he adds up to a win. And so the whole idea is if you take the average backup guy in right field, you pluck him off and you drop Ichiro in, you win 20 more games. Big number. That's a big number. It's not your total wins of the season. It's how many more games do you win because you got your starter versus the other guy. Okay? So it's this calculated way of going, what is your value? Is your value above or below that? Okay? And there were whole teams built around that, a stat like that, of going, I just want to find guys who are worth more than that. And oh, by the way, if you look at how much guys are paid in baseball, they're paid very much in relationship to that stat. The higher you are above that, the more you're worth. Because you're just paying for wins. You pay money to put a guy there to win you more games than you would that the backup guy would. I would love to develop something like that for your employee. The problem is that employees are this very, very diverse thing. But this basic idea is say, okay, because I couldn't do that, I've got to come up with what's my minimum. What's the point at which, if you're not above this, and this is where the thing is, the farther above this plateau, I've got this plane, and if you are above it, I'm looking to you become more and more important and more valuable, and I'm probably looking at doing things like giving you a raise, or I'm moving you up to more valuable positions, those sorts of things. If you drop below that, I'm looking to get rid of you. I'm looking to either improve you or get rid of you. I've got to. For me, mine is the double-double rule. So I say whatever you cost, if you're $15 an hour, then you cost $30 an hour. At $30 an hour, my minimum is $60 an hour. That's my wins against replacement number. I figure I can take any idiot and get them to $60 an hour. That's what I've got to do. Okay? So that means they got to be bringing income into the company in a value-wise where they're creating $60 an hour in value that I can turn around.